Welcome back to Silk Warrant. Today in this story is about what happens when patience stops being patience and starts being a plan.
The notice was taped to my windshield at 6 in the morning, and the tape was the kind that leaves a white ghost, residue you can't get off no matter how hard you scrub. It was from the Ashwood Pines Homeowners Association, specifically from the woman 3 houses down named Diane Mercer. The paper smelled like her cedar and entitlement. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in my glove compartment. That was my first mistake, they'd assume. There's one thing nobody in Ashwood Pines knew about me. And it lived in a filing cabinet in my basement, in a folder labeled Ridgway and Associates. Final settlement, 2019. I moved to Ashwood Pines 18 months before any of this happened. Me, my dog Pepper, and a 1987 Ford F-150 named Gerald. Gerald was faded burgundy. He had a crack in the passenger side mirror held together with electrical tape. The tailgate didn't fully close, so there was a bungee cord looped through the handle. He sounded like a cement mixer on cold mornings and smelled like motor oil and old cassette tapes. He was, without any irony, my most prized possession. My grandfather built his landscaping company with that truck. When he died, everything else went to my uncle. Gerald came to me. My name had been on the registration since 1994. The notice on my windshield said vehicles of a non-standard aesthetic condition violated Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the Ashwood Pines Community Standards. It gave me 30 days to repair the vehicle to a condition befitting the neighborhood or remove it from the property. It was signed, Diane Mercer, HOA Board President. Diane drove a pearl-white Range Rover. Every Sunday, she waxed it wearing an actual tennis skirt, even though the nearest tennis court was 11 miles away. I smiled at the letter. Not because it was funny, because I recognized it for exactly what it was, an opening move. 3 weeks earlier, Diane had knocked on my door holding a casserole dish and wearing a smile that never reached her eyes. "We're so glad you're settling in," she said. "The neighborhood has a certain cohesion. I'm sure you'll want to be part of that." The entire time she spoke, her eyes wandered past me into my house. They landed on the framed photo above my fireplace, me and my grandfather standing beside Gerald the summer before he got sick. She never asked about the picture. She just smiled tighter and left. The casserole was a survey. I didn't know that yet. Back to the notice. I did exactly one thing. I pulled out the Ashwood Pines HOA documents. The full governing packet, CC and RS, bylaws, meeting minutes going back 8 years. I downloaded them before putting in my offer on the house, a habit from my old job. For 12 years, I handled due diligence for commercial acquisitions, mostly small to mid-size entities, partnerships, private communities, corporate subsidiaries. I read governing documents the way some people read novels. What I found in the packet was interesting. Not because of Section 7, Paragraph 4. Because of Section 2, Paragraph 1, I underlined it. Set it aside. Then I called my attorney. Her name was Carla. She'd been my attorney since I left the firm. She answered on the second ring because that's what Carla does. "Tell me what you want," she said before I even finished explaining. That's also what Carla does. "I want to know everything about Ashwood Pines HOA as a legal entity," I said. "Who owns it? Who manages it, where the money goes?" "I'll call you Thursday," she said, and hung up. I walked out to the driveway and rested my hand on Gerald's hood. The metal was still warm from the afternoon sun. I left him exactly where he was. Meanwhile, Diane escalated. The second notice arrived on day 8. It cited a fine of $150 per day Gerald remained on the property. It was printed on HOA letterhead and notarized. She'd actually had it notarized. That evening, my neighbor across the street knocked on my door. Frank, retired postal worker, permanent coffee cup in hand. "She got the whole board to sign it," he said. "She always does that. Gets everyone in a room, talks until they're exhausted, then hands them a pen." He paused. "I've been here 11 years. My boat's been in my driveway for 9 of them. She's been after me since year 1. I looked at Frank differently after that. What kind of boat? 1978 Chris Craft, he said quietly. Needs work. Same as your truck, I guess. That was the moment Frank became useful to me. He just didn't know it yet. Carla called Thursday exactly like she promised. Okay, she said. Here's what Ashwood Pines HOA actually is. It's a non-stock, member-managed nonprofit corporation. The management contract, maintenance, reserves, enforcement belongs to a company called Mercer Property Group. I sat down slowly. Mercer, I said. Diane Mercer is the sole owner, Carla replied. The HOA pays Mercer Property Group $42,000 a year under administrative services. She paused. There's also a reserve fund holding $114,000. One signatory controls it. I already knew the answer. Diane Mercer. There's more, Carla said. The HOA itself was governed by a 5-person board, but buried inside the founding documents was the clause I'd underlined earlier. Section 2, Paragraph 1. If the HOA board failed to maintain a quorum of 3 active members, governance defaulted to the homeowners themselves. And by majority vote, the homeowners could restructure the board, including transferring existing contracts. Ashwood Pines had 112 homes. The board currently had 3 members. One of them was Frank. How long would it take to trigger a membership vote? I asked. If one board member resigns, Carla said, the quorum collapses. With proper notice, you could call a vote within 30 days. I thought about Frank and his Chris Craft. I thought about Diane's eyes moving through my house like she was taking inventory. And I thought about the folder in my basement. The folder labeled Ridgway and Associates, Final Settlement, 2019 contained something nobody in Ashwood Pines ever imagined I had. Enough money to buy something much bigger than a truck. I went back through 8 years of HOA meeting minutes, and I noticed Diane's pattern immediately. She talked until people were tired. Then she handed them a pen, page after page. Motion carried unanimously, motion carried unanimously, motion carried unanimously. She'd done it with the landscaping contract, the pool resurfacing. Every decision that moved money anywhere passed the same way. She planned to do it again with Gerald. I just needed to make sure she ran out of room first. That Saturday morning, I knocked on Frank's door. I'm going to need your seat on the board, I told him. Not forever, just long enough. Frank looked past me toward Gerald sitting in my driveway. Faded paint, cracked mirror, bungee cord holding the tailgate shut. My Chris Craft, he asked. Stays in your driveway indefinitely, I said. I'll put it in writing. He nodded slowly. The kind of nod people give when they've waited years to hear exactly the right sentence. Frank resigned from the board on a Tuesday. Quietly. 1-sentence resignation letter delivered by certified mail. By the time Diane found out, I had already filed the membership notice. Proper format, proper notice period. Delivered to all 112 households personally over 3 evenings. Pepper came with me every time. Diane showed up at my front door Wednesday evening. I opened it before she knocked. I'd already heard her pull into the driveway. The Range Rover was quieter than Gerald, but Diane always parked a little too hard, just enough to announce herself. This is not how this is done, she said. No casserole this time, no smile either. The governing documents say otherwise, I replied. You don't understand how this community works. I've read 8 years of meeting minutes, I said. I think I understand perfectly. Her eyes drifted past me into the house again. But this time they weren't curious. They were calculating, looking for leverage. There was none. I'll call an emergency board session, she snapped. You don't have quorum, I said calmly. Frank resigned. Section 2, Paragraph 1. The smell of cedar perfume hit me again. Same perfume she wore the day she brought the casserole. She only wore it when she expected to win. She left without saying goodbye. That was new. The membership vote happened on the final Saturday of the month in the community center parking lot because too many people showed up to fit inside. 61 households voted. 54 voted in favor of restructuring the board, terminating Mercer Property Group's contract, and appointing interim management. Diane voted no. The remaining board members abstained. They looked exhausted. Frank sat near the back in a folding chair drinking coffee from a thermos. Then everything moved quickly. Mercer Property Group's contract was terminated. Buried in the contract was an exit clause allowing the HOA to recover 12 months of management fees if termination occurred for cause. $42,000 returned to the reserve fund. With a new signatory attached, the reserve fund now held more than $156,000. And then there was the HOA itself. As a corporate entity, it held assets, equity, infrastructure. Carla had already researched the restructuring options thoroughly. Under the right conditions, ownership of the HOA could legally transfer to a new controlling entity. The Ridgeway settlement gave me more than enough to make that happen. I bought Ashwood Pines HOA on a Thursday morning. Carla handled the paperwork. I signed everything in her office using a heavy silver pen that felt expensive enough to matter. Outside her windows, the city moved loud and fast. Inside, I felt perfectly still. I drove home afterward in Gerald. The engine rattled halfway up the on-ramp. The electrical tape on the mirror caught the sunlight and flashed for a second like something intentional. I parked in the same spot in my driveway, same angle, same crack in the mirror. Same bungee cord. I sat there for a minute and didn't think about Diane at all. The first action under the new HOA management revised Section 7, Paragraph 4. Vehicles with documented personal or family historical significance were now exempt from aesthetic violations as long as registration remained current. The second action was a formal letter to Frank confirming recreational boats were fully permitted on private driveways. The third action changed the HOA management fee, $1 per year. Paid to a trust in my grandfather's name, I never found out when Diane finally understood the full picture. I didn't need to. She once stood in front of the neighborhood and talked about cohesion. She was right about the cohesion. She was just wrong about who it belonged to. The original notice is still sitting in my glove compartment. The ghost of the tape residue still catches the morning light sometimes and looks almost like frost. I leave it there on purpose. My grandfather used to say the loudest person in the room was usually managing something. Fear most of the time. Sometimes ambition they didn't know how to control. He drove that truck for 40 years, kept his tools clean, never needed anyone to know what he was worth. I learned due diligence from my career. I learned patience from him. And what happens when people mistake my silence for weakness? That part I figured out on my own. Gerald is still in the driveway, still faded, still loud. Still held together with electrical tape and one stubborn bungee cord. And he isn't going anywhere. Neither am I. If the people in your life described you at your quietest moment, would their version match who you become when it's finally your turn to move?